We've been speaking the last few weeks about, the capital gains tax debate sort of reared its head again with Labor suggesting, maybe they want to have another poke around at this. And because they're not learning their lesson the first few times they stuffed it up and dropped the ball. But it was the captain's call then. And I suppose with lack of anything else to say or do, they want to talk tax again. So capital gains tax, it's been one of these perennial discussions in New Zealand because we don't have one. Well, we've got the Bright Line test, which has been reduced... of course, from 10 years, it had to come down 10 years. I mean, that's not a bright line test. But capital gains tax, many jurisdictions have them. 130 odd countries have these capital gains, a formal capital gains tax. About 30, 40 countries don't. That's us. We don't have a full capital gains tax. And they would be all consuming. It wouldn't just be on property. From what I've seen in the past, capital gains tax would have to be across the board, probably to be fair. And you said to me, okay, Duncan, let's get an expert in to talk about this and to find out the truth about, whether we need one or whether we're sort of an outlier without one. And so we've done that. Economist Ed McKnight, who is with OPS Partners and is their resident economist there and talks a lot about property and tax and capital gains tax and has done seminars. And he's read reports, written reports. He's right up to date with this stuff. He's been 5 years with OPS and he's well equipped to provide all these sort of insights. Also a proud member of the Institute of Directors, so he's well qualified. And Ed, nice to have you on. G'day.
Yeah, g'day, Duncan.
Capital gains tax. Is it a glaring omission in our tax system?
Well, I don't really believe so. And I think the issue with the capital gains taxes and the whole discussion around it is it always starts from should we have a capital gains tax or not, rather than saying, well, let's say we raise the money, what would we do with it? And I was always a big fan of what Peter Dunn, the former leader of United Future, used to say, which is the purpose of the tax system is to fund what the government wants to do. So the first thing we should really ask is, well, what does the government want to do? Now, there are a couple of arguments. We could say maybe we do need some additional tax revenue, specifically around our ageing population, because we're going to have an increasing reliance on superannuation. We're going to have more over 65s who qualify for that, so we're going to be spending lots and lots of money on that, as well as because we've got an ageing population and people are living longer, there are also going to be there's going to be more demand on the healthcare system. And so you could kind of make an argument that maybe we do need some additional money in the future. I suppose the other thing you could do with it is say, okay, we're going to start taxing capital, but we're going to decrease the income tax rates. And I'd really like to see in this whole discussion around capital gains taxes that we don't just say, well, I don't like that property investors are making lots of money, and so therefore I want to tax them because I don't like that somebody else is making money through property investment and I'm not. The real discussion should be on, okay, if we raise this additional revenue, how much is it going to raise? When is it going to raise the revenue? And what are we specifically going to do with it?
The last time I looked at Labor's numbers on this was the first time they released a policy around this. And it took something like 10 to 15 years to get any kind of decent revenue from the market. So I think we might have got, after 10, 15 years, $2 billion. And even then, mate, that would pay. I mean, it's significant enough. But it just took so long to build as a revenue stream. And also, once you bring in a capital gains tax, people might just not sell. Simple as that. You avoid any capital gains or not selling, don't you?
Well, that's a really interesting thing with the Bright Line test. So when we saw the Bright Line test extend from 2 years and then to 5 years and then to 10 years, the natural response from property investors was to say, well, that's okay. I'll just hold my property for longer. And then you get into this really weird scenario where somebody's owned an investment property for 5 years. They really want to sell it now, but they go, I'm not going to bring that property to market because I've got to hold it for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it happens to be, so I don't have to be subject to that tax. Now, what we then saw was that the number of listings decreased, and so the total number of properties available on websites like TradeMe, OneRoof, realestate.co.nz, the number of properties available started to come down, which is effectively the same thing as a supply decrease, because rather than bringing their properties to market because they wanted to realise the capital gains or they wanted to be done with that asset, investors said, well, I need to hold on to it, otherwise I'm going to have to write a cheque to the IRD. And so I think if you were to bring in a capital gains tax, so this is kind of moving away from my position where I really prefer New Zealand where we don't have one, but if we were to bring one in, I think it probably should be retrospective, so it should go back in time, and if you bought a property in 1980 and you haven't sold it yet, maybe those gains should be subject to capital gains tax if you were to bring one in, and that it should be open-ended, which means that it doesn't matter whether you owned your shares, your property, your business for 10, 15, 20 years. It should all be subject if you were to do it the right way. Now, Duncan, I don't think that would ever happen because it would be totally politically unpalatable, but if you were to do it the right way, I think you'd probably have to make it retrospective, and the reason is then the revenue starts to come in straight away as opposed to not making much money at all for the next 10 to 15 years.
Wow. Imagine making it. I'm just thinking how unpopular you're going to even be for suggesting that, me for hosting it. But, imagine making it retrospective. Like, we'd be changing the goalposts 30, 40, 50 years after someone bought a property. It would be so significant that whoever suggested that and pushed it through Parliament, you think Donald Trump's the only one that's getting sort of potentially assassinated. It would be so unpopular in New Zealand that politician would never, ever see the light of day again.
Yeah, I think you did right about that. So when I say that, because I suggested it on another radio station the other day, and people were very anti, and I was like, I'm not suggesting that they do that. I'm saying if you, let's say you brought in a capital gains tax, and let's say I'm now the chief economist of the Council of Trade Unions or another left-leaning body, that's what I'd be pushing for, because it starts to raise revenue straight away. You see, the biggest issue with the capital gains tax is, let's say Labor comes in and they say, sweet, we're going to bring in a capital gains tax, and then National comes in a couple of years later and that capital gains tax isn't bringing in that much money. And so then a right-leaning party can say, well, let's just get rid of that because it's not bringing in much money anyway. So it's a very easy decision to make. It would make it a lot harder for National to get rid of that policy if Labor said, cool, we're going to change it, we're going to make it retrospective. That means we get revenue in straight away and we decrease personal income taxes. That starts to become very hard to then reverse.
I don't think any of these politicians have any sort of balls and guts to be this bold anyway. Like, talk about reducing income taxes. Yeah, well, there's a case for that, but Luxon's has done it on a sort of a minor scale. Labor's never going to do that. Over their dead bodies. I reckon it's taboo. The word taboo is interesting word in terms of New Zealand. What's taboo? I think touching New Zealand super now is taboo. I think now capital gains tax might be as well, the way it's been dealt with over the last number of years. It just, Captain's Call, Jacinda Ardern, it was a flop. They tried it, they couldn't get there,
There was a very, very interesting article that came out by Richard Prebble, who was a former Labor Party minister and also leader of the ACT Party, and he said the trouble with capital gains taxes is people do not vote for policies that necessarily suit their financial situation. They vote for the wealth they wish they had rather than the wealth that they actually have. And so I think a lot of people think, well, if I was a property investor, if I was making a lot of money through business, I probably wouldn't want to pay that tax. And, my general view is we've seen a very, very large expansion of government and the state as a proportion of our economy over the last 6 years. And I challenge almost anybody to point to anything that's got substantially better, even though we're spending substantially more on government projects. It's not like our health system has got substantially better. It's not like our education system has got substantially better. And so my challenge is, before the government starts wanting to raise more money, use the money you've already got way better, but to prove that if you get even more money, that it's going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, I think you did right. And if you look at the tax take, and it goes up every year, we spend more every year. National still spent more than Labor at the last budget, even though they were criticising Labor for being these mad socialists out of control, which is the way it is. You spend more because of inflation and so forth. And so you look at it, 47,000 public servants when National left office, 62,000 when they came back to office. So 15,000 more public servants. Are you getting a better service, Ed? Do you find you get sent to the hospital quicker? Is IRD quicker to pick up the phone? It doesn't operate, does it?
No, I don't believe that any of that has got substantially better. And I think that's why people do.